The Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs says it's now engaging Tshwane and Ekurhuleni officials following a decision by ratings agency Moody's to downgrade Ekurhuleni to junk status and to place Tshwane on review. This decision comes after the two metros failed to submit their audited financial statements to the JSE last month. Both municipalities have committed to handing over those statements by the end of March.
So the JSE has said to the municipalities, you have failed to comply in line with the covenants that we have with you or the bondholders have with you. So we are giving you a month in which to remedy the situation and or to explain yourself so that we are able to justify whether the reasons are adequate. And if the reasons are not adequate, there is a risk of suspension of your bonds from a trading point of view. You never really want to reach that situation, and it is thus that national government has stepped in, is engaging with the provincial government to say what is happening in Tshwane, what is happening in Ekurhuleni, and how do we avert a situation where they get to a point of default. We're at the point of saying there is a potential crisis, and we're going to have to come in, get the reports, come in, resolve the problem. But where there is instances where we need to invoke certain sections of legislation to enable us to act swiftly, we certainly would be able to do that. But that's not our starting point at this stage. At this stage, it is fact-finding, get all the information, engage with the province. And we wouldn't come in before even engaging with the province, because the obligation is on the province to come in first, and we provide additional support.
All right, let's get you some analysis on these developments. Local government expert Dr Harlan Cloete joins us for this discussion. Dr Cloete, thanks very much indeed for your time. And I'm sure you heard the comments there of the Deputy Cooperative Minister. And we know we're in trouble when even he says what is happening in Ekurhuleni and Tshwane.
Good afternoon to you and good afternoon to your viewers. Look, I think the decision by the Deputy Minister to step in is welcomed. National government, remember we've got developmental local government and we've got also different spheres of government, and so they're interdependent. And so the minister is right, you know, the first oversight role is that of the province. But it is welcomed, the fact that the minister has, Deputy Minister has intervened.
Yeah, absolutely. But he does also say that there is a potential crisis here, right? And what would that crisis situation entail for these two very important municipalities in our country? Ekurhuleni is home to Africa's biggest aviation hub. We know our Tambo International Airport. And Tshwane is the country's administrative capital. So when the Deputy Minister talks crisis, what would that look like for residents there?
I think, you know, what we've seen in the last couple of years is that we have a governance crisis, and the problems in municipality is not one thing, but it boils down to a governance crisis. Sometimes it's a matter of capacity and capability of the institution to perform its function. Sometimes it's plain and simple politics. Sometimes there's a lack of will. But you know, these things are supposed to be picked up at a much earlier point. You know, in terms of how we manage the risk. You know, no municipality or no metro would want to risk being downgraded to junk status. So it does say something about the creditworthiness of the municipality, the financial confidence, and the reliance on confidence in the financial governance taking place there. So municipalities have not been in a crisis since yesterday.
Right.
Week after week, we have these discussions about the governance problems in municipality.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely not a new headline story. It's certainly part of what we've come to expect, perhaps from particular municipalities in certain provinces. But you talk about, you know, governance being one of the major issues. You talk about politics and perhaps a lack of will. I wonder how much of the coalition politics plays into this lack of will.
Look, we're not quite sure, but what I can say is that in my discussions last week with a consultant working within local government, he talks about the instability. The problem if you have political instability, it's all likely that political instability plays itself also in administrative instability, where people are not secure of jobs. For example, I was in a municipality last week where everybody or the senior managers are all acting So that instability creates uncertainty, you know, and I've got no doubt that there are certain sectors, certain people that profit through chaos, who profit through the instability also as well. So political instability, unfortunately, then plays itself out at administrative instability, which doesn't bode well to the residents of any area.
Yeah, certain sectors. Yeah, when you say certain sectors profit from chaos, that's what we think, right? It boils down essentially, even for the residents who might be listening to this discussion, to issues of service delivery. Will the potholes in my road be filled? Will the lights in the street come on at night?
Exactly that. If your eye is off the ball, if you fail to deliver those basic services, if you fail to keep the lights on, if you fail to account for how finances are spent in terms of, if you fail at the basics, that spills because you're looking at position and you're looking at other issues other than delivering services, which is your number one mandate. And so service delivery also, besides delivering making sure that the lights are on, that potholes are fixed, etc. It's also to provide leadership. It's to provide leadership that inspires, leadership that brings hope, leadership that sends a clear message out to the residents that we actually care and that we are willing to do what we were appointed to do and elected to, and that is delivering services to the people. I think there can be no higher calling than working for the greater good of your community and your society. Unfortunately, it is so that in many of our municipalities, there's a lack of administrative will and there's a lack of political will, and which then comes down to a lack of creativity and innovation in how do we then deliver services in conjunction or with the residents in a proactive way, instead of being in this crisis mode all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything you're saying, Dr. Cloete, is incredibly important, perhaps especially so this year, because we're building up to what is supposed to be, or what many are calling, probably the most important election since 1994.
Look, I don't want to downplay this election, but if we talk about the state delivers at local government. And so for me, the real focus is on 2026 and what's going to happen in the next 3 years. Although national provincial gives us an indication where it goes, but it is at the local government level, a sphere where we have seen independence, for example, the rise of community issue-based parties, where residents are losing confidence in bigger parties to solve their problem. And so 2026, my focus as a student of local government is on 2026. You will recall in 2016 we had about 27 coalitions. In 2021, that number went up to about 70. And I can confidently say, I think by the 2026 locally government elections, we will have over 100 coalitions, because communities are simply losing faith in the ability of bigger parties to firstly understand the complexities of the problem and having the will to work with residents to solve it. Because, you know, in political parties, the party says jump, you ask how high. And so it is often at the cost or at the mercy of the interest of the local people in that community. Yeah,
absolutely. Wow, that's according to the numbers that you've given us there, that's a 500% increase from, if you're right in your projection for 2016 for 100 coalitions, from 20 to 100 in the space of 10 years, right? That would be a 500% improvement. The bottom line is we have to get better at coalition politics.
We will have to. You know, colleagues of mine at the University of Free State, they are busy putting together a course in coalition governance. But, you know, I mean, a course is good to understand the theory and practice. What we need, I think, you know, is a coalition of citizens. You know, citizens should not put all their faith and confidence only in political parties. I think they have neglected or forgotten the agency that they have. You know, the sports clubs that are there. You know, we have resilient communities, but unfortunately we rely too much and we look too much at the politicians to solve all the problems. Unless communities start mobilizing themselves and together with the academia and together with all the forces for good in that community and society, work towards how do we put our purpose together. And so these academic courses are good, but it also needs willing and ethical leaders within communities who are willing to say, you know what, the business of project rebuilding my community, I cannot leave that to politicians only. We all have to be active citizens, playing our part to make sure that our democracy works. Now, if you look at the National Development Plan, that is exactly what it says. Government admitted last year that it failed at implementing the National Development Plan, and the crux and one of the reasons is a lack of active citizens. We need citizens in our country to be much more vocal, and more vocal in terms of their rights and responsibilities, and to roll up their sleeves and to get on with building this country. We cannot leave it just to politicians.
Yeah, and perhaps that active citizenry was easier to define pre-1994, Dr. Cloete. We knew exactly what we were fighting against. It was a common enemy of apartheid, and the enemy was clear in what was being done wrong. Maybe that's harder now for people to see, how do I do that? How do I put food on the table, get up at 4 o'clock and take 2 taxis and go to work, put my children through school, and still be involved and be a part of active citizenry?
But you see, I think that's what I'm saying. You are quite right. Before 94, and to destroy somehow is more easy, I think, than to build. Building is complex.
Right.
I think if you look at the ANC, it has struggled from a revolutionary party into a modern party, from a movement to a party. And so building, each one of us can play their part. I think the middle class in this country, the intellectuals, the academics, those are the people that's normally at the forefront, and they have almost abdicated that role. It's almost, let me sit back, let me now eat, let me amass as much wealth that I can. You remember Smuts Ngiyama used to say, I did not struggle to be poor. And so Professor Sampieter Blanche 10 years already said, there's this mentality that I must get rich as quickly as possible at the expense of whoever. And so we have lost that social cohesion, that social solidarity. Yeah. The late Anton Rook used to say, if they don't eat, we don't sleep. And so we need a collective sense of consciousness in terms of playing our part wherever we are, be that in business, be that in the church, be that in community, be that in a sports club, to use this position of privilege that I have, or leadership, to make sure that I encourage and influence as many people to become active citizens. And active citizens starts from volunteering and saying, here am I can play a part here. I can belong to a neighborhood watch in the area where I live. There are many neighborhood watches. There are many opportunities, I think, for ordinary South Africans to get involved in building this country. But, I find people, it's very good for the ego, it's very good for you I can complain about what is bad about the situation. But there's a critical lack of people to say, what, I can see what is bad, let us try something new to make this. So active citizen starts in the home. It starts at home. What can I do to make the life of my neighbor a little bit better? How can I play my part? It is not that difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Harlan Cloete, it's been a great pleasure talking to you this afternoon in a discussion that started off about Tshwane and Ekurhuleni and that decision by ratings agency Moody to downgrade Ekurhuleni to junk status and to place Tshwane on review, a discussion on active citizenry. Dr. Cloete, thanks very much for joining us.